So, firstly, welcome to the inaugural podcast, James Marshall. It's great to have you on Rugby Talk. Welcome, man.
Hey, thanks, mate. Excited to be on. I know this is your first one, so really looking forward to it. I know how hard it is to start a podcast, so looking forward to joining you.
I'm really honored to have you on here because obviously, Waterlag Podcast and you, James Marshall, are my inspiration, why I've started it, and really the interest is behind delving into the lives of professional rugby players and local South African rugby players, of course, but just to hear from a professional perspective and to connect actually to anywhere in the world. It's really a great platform.
Yeah, for sure. Like the power of social media is amazing these days, and how many people can hear your thoughts or your stories. It's pretty powerful, and that's one of the reasons I got into it as well, just to share some of the guys' stories who I know have really cool stories and really good people, but the rest of the world don't really get to experience that side of them. So that's sort of why I set it up as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty awesome, and especially for the ones who, for example, like you've done Brad Weber now recently, your latest podcast. You are unplugging your mic for your podcast, and I'm plugging in mine. So, like for example, it's perhaps their favorite player, and they can then understand now the lives of you can say the hero or their favorite player.
Yeah, for sure. There's it's been cool because some people have had thoughts on some player who they didn't like or thought, oh, this guy seems like a dick or something, and then they listen to the podcast and they're like, oh, this guy's actually like a really cool guy, and it sort of changes their perspective on what they think of him as a player, which is something I've really enjoyed, getting that feedback saying, oh, this guy's now my favorite player because I know what he's been through, I know his story, and I feel like I can relate to this guy more than I did just seeing him on the field. So I'm loving hearing that stuff from people, and it's been quite rewarding.
So yeah, definitely. How can I say? I saw on your story earlier this afternoon that somebody commented that another rugby player with a podcast, starting a podcast. So is there a stigma?
Oh yeah, I didn't know much about that either. Yeah, someone just messaged me, and they actually showed me the photo. It was when I first set up. One of the comments in the box was, "Oh shit, just what I wanted to see. Another almost retired rugby player setting up a podcast. Just what the world needs, or something." And I didn't even see the comment at the start, but that guy just brought it up the other day, and it was interesting to see. But to be honest, I was always expecting a little bit of negative feedback. You're always going to get it, but I've been surprised how little negative feedback I've had, or that I've seen. Not that I go looking for it, but I haven't really had many comments of people trying to bag me too much. And that's the beauty of the podcast. Like, if you don't like it, you just don't listen to it. You don't have to listen to it. It's your choice, and it's there if you want it. And if you don't want it, just don't listen to it. So there's no real reason to criticize a podcast, I don't think, because if you're not interested, just don't listen to it.
Yeah, because what's the guy doing there at the first place? Giving a negative comment, just don't say anything.
Yeah, 100%. But there's people out there. A lot of people don't like seeing people try new things, or people don't like other people being successful, especially unsuccessful people. So there's always going to be that stigma around. So it's always just best to ignore anyone who's just trying to knock you down. So it happens in rugby all the time. But yeah, like I said, it hasn't happened as much as I expected in the podcast world.
That's awesome, because you're actually bringing in something different with the pranks and that. It's really, really funny, especially with I like the one with Dalton Papali'i. That was good.
Yeah, he's a good man. So innocent in that prank.
But the one of Rico CDs of investments. I think the people should really have a listen. Unbelievable.
Yeah, we've had some good fun. It started like back in the Hurricanes. We used to do it a little bit, and Yeah, it's got real hard to get people now. Everyone's onto it. Not many people are answering their phones if they see a random number. Everyone's pretty sketched out. So I've just left it for a little while, but hopefully get a few more down the track when people least expect it.
Hopefully, yeah. And James, earlier before, well, pre-COVID, obviously it's affecting everybody globally, and obviously a pandemic, and it's a pity that we couldn't link up in Cape Town as we just arrived from Japan a little bit too late and missed a trip to Cape Town with the Canes.
Sorry, what was that? I missed a part of that. Skip. Yeah. So can you ask that again?
So we were supposed to meet up in Cape Town, and you came a bit too late home from Japan, and then
right.
we unfortunately couldn't meet up.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't realize that was you, to be honest, but I remember you asking if we could link up in Cape Town, and I knew I was always going to be touch and go whether I was going to make that first trip. I was in Japan, and I got back to New Zealand way too late, so I was never going to make it in the end. But hopefully you caught up with a couple of the lads over there and got to introduce yourself.
Unfortunately, the busy Karifi said he was too busy, so we were going to link up, but then fortunately didn't happen.
Classic dupes.
And James, can you explain to us basically your background of when the rugby started, obviously growing up in New Zealand, and when your love for rugby started, and how you progressed through the phases of school rugby and club rugby, and your experience with rugby throughout?
Yeah, so obviously in New Zealand, it's a pretty rugby heavy culture. So I always loved watching rugby from a really young age. My parents took me down to my first rugby game at 5 years old. I didn't really enjoy it, so I went and played soccer. Took my brother with me. He came and played soccer. So I played soccer until I was 8 years old, and then we moved down to Nelson, and all my friends were playing rugby down there. So I thought I'd just go along and play rugby with them and give it a go. So that was the start of the switch, and from then sort of went through the grades. I was never very good. I was I didn't make rep teams or anything like that, and it wasn't until I sort of went to Nelson College. I always wanted to be a professional rugby player or involved in rugby. So there was a few times throughout my career where I thought, this is looking pretty unlikely. Like I can't even make rep teams. I'm not even one of the best players at my college. Can't even make the A team at my college. I was like, realistically, I'm going to have to try and find something else. But I gave myself a goal of making the first 15. So I went pretty hard, which is like the top rugby side at the college. So gave myself a goal of making that, and I went hard, trained hard, made a few sacrifices, and got it. Like, I remember asked my parents for a gym membership for my Christmas present, things like that. And I started. I ended up making that first 15 side, and and it sort of just snowballed from there, realizing that things start to pay off when you start working hard.
Well, that's awesome, brother, because you're always going to have to make sacrifices, plenty of them. And how was your mental processes when you were struggling, couldn't get into the rep teams and things like that? So at a young age, were there any other like local players that you drew inspiration from, or was it just your own mindset to push yourself and try again?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Initially, when I was first missing out, I wasn't thinking too much of it because I'd never really made them. I wasn't really driving that hard to be in the rep teams at that age. Obviously, I was a little bit gutted when I missed out, but it was never like it wasn't the end of the world for me at the time. But it wasn't till after school where I really thought, shit, this is a career option for me, and if I work really hard these next couple of years out of school, I'm a real chance to potentially make a living off it. Maybe make a living off it. Maybe potentially traveling the world or going to some clubs was my thought process. But I went pretty hard, and Andrew Goodman, who I had on my podcast the other day, he was a massive help to me coming out of school. He would pick me up from my house. I didn't have a car, so he'd take me training, and he basically taught me, because he was striving to make the Marcos at this time as well, and he was a little bit older. He was probably 24 or something, so he had a bit of background and knew what it took to get to that next level. So I sort of just followed him and copied his sessions and stuff, and we both worked pretty hard together for a couple of years there, and then eventually both cracked the side.
That's amazing, brother, because you can actually never pay enough gratitude to Andrew Goodman, or the person that you pay the most tribute to, because picking you up, like you said, going to the Marcos, and who are actually the champions who edge out the Auckland Blues. And that's an amazing story, because taking you to training, not worrying about it, wouldn't ask for anything in return, and then working together. So that's an amazing story in itself.
Yeah, I owe a lot to him, and also my brother was a big part of my career as well. He's obviously a professional rugby player as well, and together growing up, we were always just into each other, like constantly playing one-on-one, just in the backyard. We without him, there's no way that I would have been a professional rugby player either. So he was a big part of it, and then I'd like to think that when he came out of school, I tried to help him as much as he could as well, to get across the line as well.
And Tom done really well for the Crusaders, right? So it was basically, I'm not sure if you guys played together professionally, but Hardy Xavier and Julian Xavier, basically the one-on-ones, and Rico and Akira Ioane. So that's really awesome. And obviously you having the experience to take yourself over to the next level, assisted your brother as well.
Yeah, so we played for Tasman the first couple of years together. I think it was 2012 and 13 we both played. He was second 5 and I was 10. So we had a couple of really good years there playing together. Loved my time there. And then he obviously made the Crusaders pretty young. So he made Superugby before me. So I think it was his second year out of school. He ended up getting picked up by the Crusaders. And he went really well down there. So it was awesome to see his real rapid progress. He made New Zealand 20s, which always helps, and had a really good tournament there. And he's obviously kicked on. He's in Japan now and making a fair bit of yen.
And like you said, how did you feel as you assisted your brother? You guys went to Tasman, played together there. You were at 10, he was at 12. And how did it feel for you at the moment? Obviously you were proud, but did you feel a bit disappointed that he made Superugby before you?
I was disappointed that I didn't make it, but I wasn't disappointed that he made it before me, if that makes sense. I wanted to be a Superugby player, and I thought I was probably having a good enough season that year to potentially make at least a wider squad, but that wasn't to be. So I ended up going over to Italy on a 6-month gig with Aironi that year. So I knew I wanted to test myself, and that was a real good opportunity to play a high level of rugby and just experience a new culture over there, which was an awesome experience. But obviously seeing my brother make the Crusaders was pretty special as well. It was awesome to see him go into that setup and do so well.
And you're speaking about the culture, so you went over into Italy, obviously a new language, different people and things like that. The level of rugby in terms of physicality and skill, do you think that you could have potentially, if you stayed on, maybe attained citizenship and played for Italy?
That was a discussion at the time. When I was over there, I was only 20 or 21. I was pretty young. It was the language was different. I'd only been living at home in New Zealand, so it was a real eye-opener for me. I was over there, took my girlfriend at the time, now wife. She came over with me. We'd only been together for maybe a couple of months, if that, and it was a massive decision for us to go over there. And we depended on each other so much because that's all we had. And it was a real cool time. It was real awesome places we got to travel and see. Loved the experience. Obviously, there's some real hard parts about living over there with the language and stuff, even like going to the supermarket and stuff's a bit of a mission, and the driving's pretty crazy on the other side of the road, and they're pretty mad drivers over there with some busy roads and some tough toll roads to negotiate. But we loved our time, and it was an awesome experience. Like I said, getting to play some really good players. Like, you're playing some of the best players in Europe over there in the competition. So it was a real eye-opening experience for me.
And that's actually an amazing story, because your girlfriend of a few months went over to Europe, to Italy, and you actually lived there together for that 6 months, and then experiencing new culture together, and she's your wife now, so that's crazy. You started a family together. It's actually really, really amazing, because who would have thought, like, and that massive decision at such a young age, it's amazing. And she's part of your rugby journey, your life journey, and still on your side, by your side.
Yeah, well, we knew that at the time. We're like, this is a big call. She's either going to be flying back home to New Zealand in a few weeks or months, or we're probably going to get married. Like, it was one of those things, like, it's a make or break call for a relationship. We'll see how it goes, and if it works out, well, then we're probably going to be in it for the long haul, because it was such a tough time for us together at such an early stage that it's pretty cool when you think about it like that.
And your family life, obviously, how long was it that after you left Italy that you and your wife got married? And when you started a family, how did that affect your professional rugby career?
Yes, good question. We got married, I think we're 5 years after we got back. So we'd been together for probably 5 years before we got married, and then had children the following year. So one the next year, and then the next one 2 years after that. But I loved having, I loved it when we had our first child, and what it did to my rugby. I felt like it just I wasn't so rugby focused. It's weird, because it sort of made me not, I guess I felt like I wanted to get home quicker. So potentially my extras and stuff I probably wasn't doing as many extras and stuff as I probably could have or should have. But I felt like when I got home, I was just completely not thinking rugby. Like, rugby was gone. And if I had a bad game, usually I'd stress over that for a couple of days. But when I went home and saw my wee son, I'd be like, oh, like, he doesn't care. Like, at the end of the day, it's only a game of rugby. So I was able to get over games like that a lot quicker, and just realize that it is just a game that I love playing. So no need to stress about it, and just go out there and enjoy it and have fun. So I think it had sort of two sides to the story. It's made me relax a bit more, but also probably made me relax a little bit too much in terms of work ethic off the field. If I had an option of spending time with my son, or doing that extra kicking session, I was probably going to favour spending time with my son. So it's interesting. I'm not really sure if there was what's better, or whether people find their career's gone to a new level with kids or not. So it's an interesting one and a good question.
Excellent. And obviously that assisted with your mental health and your relaxation, because you need your mind. If you had a bad game, you need to take your mind off it. And family is all that matters, really. So I remember when I was younger and I used to play at the primary school level and things like that, I was a really bad sportsman. And I remember one game I scored 2 tries and we still lost the game. I never shook any of the opponent or my teammates' hands. So I was a really bad sportsman, but luckily that's out of myself now.
That's good stuff.
And if you look at it, thinking about your family while you're playing, did you ever think about, like, while you're playing or training, about injuries and how that could affect your family in terms of performance or like assisting around the house or anything like that, especially while your son was young?
Not really. I feel like if you start thinking about injuries as a rugby player, you're going to get yourself into trouble. There's been a few times in my career where I've had contracts which were subject to passing a medical, and I had maybe 4 or 5 games left to play, and I always found those games really hard because I knew that I really needed this contract, but I also needed to play well in these games that I was about to play. So I always found that a really hard period for me. But in terms of just trying to not get injured to support my family, I never really felt that. Like, I knew that if I did get injured, I'd be able to get enough support to help my family. And injuries are part of the game. If you start thinking about them too much or trying to avoid them, that's when you often get them. So it's just the best to go out there, trust yourself, and play what you see.
Whatever happens, and it is part of the game, and we have to accept that. Sometimes it's extremely difficult to accept it, but like you said, it's a 50-50. Either you get injured or you don't, and you have to put it all out there. Like you said, there was a few games remaining, but you also have to think about performing as well, and that's a lot of pressure actually.
Yeah, 100%. Like, if you're worried about injuries, your mind's not on the right thing. You need to be thinking about the game in hand, and especially in the big games towards the back end of the season, when it's often when the thought process comes in. These are the games that you need to be like right on for. So you've got to just focus on your job, and one step at a time, try and get through your role in that game. And if you're thinking about injuries, that makes it really tough.
Yeah, and you've obviously returned from Coco Cola Red Sparks in Japan, and ended with a hurricane. So have you officially retired, or are you still looking to play local club?
No, I'm pretty sure I've retired. Like, I've actually got a coaching role with Tasman next season, so
awesome.
Really looking forward to diving into the coaching scene. I did a little bit with the Hurricanes last year when Carlos left, so I've really enjoyed the quick transition into coaching, and it was always something that I wanted to do. I just didn't want to move the family around because we've moved so much. So we moved down to Nelson, and the goal was to get a coaching job with Tasman, and it's happened pretty quick. I've did a little bit with them this year just to sort of learn and see how it all operates, and really looking forward to next year. It's an awesome culture down here, and very successful time for the club. So hoping to add something to the squad here, and hopefully for another successful season next year.
Hopefully, and for Tasman to retain the championship, obviously. And with having your experience, how does that assist the backline players, like mentoring, perhaps like Mitchell Hunt? You had him on as well as in your podcast. So as friends, but also as a professional relationship, what do you think you can bring to Tasman?
Yeah, it's a good one because obviously there's a really experienced group there. They've all it's quite especially in the back line, a lot of them are Super Rugby players, so they're all pretty onto it. So it's more about challenging, discussing, and just seeing sort of as a group coming up with ideas together. At the end of the day, the guys out there are the ones who have to make the decisions. So as a coach, I always think it's, if you're telling them to do too much, or if you're telling them to do things that they don't actually believe in, it's not going to work. So it's really important that the players have bought into whatever the idea is that your plan is, and ideally it does come from them, with planted seeds from yourself or the other coaches to make sure that you're on the right track. But the game's such a player-driven game these days that those split-second decisions out on the field make massive difference, and you can't really coach that through the week. You can sort of have plans around it and have plans in place on what we want to do when we see things like this, but at the end of the day, it's that split-second decision, whether we pull it off and execute it, or whether we miss that opportunity and miss the chance to win the game.
Definitely 100% there. And you're talking about like split decisions and things like that. Obviously, you can't plan and what happens in the game, injuries in the game, and perhaps a final pass where a player should have passed instead of a handball. And when you're talking about also about players buying into the philosophy of the coach, if a player doesn't agree with it, do you think that could lead to difficulties for that specific coach or the entire coaching? So.
Yeah, for sure. If there's conflict between the coaches and players, man, it can be quite poisonous, and especially when teams aren't going well. That's often when you see it. I've had a fair bit of my career. Successful teams that are winning, it's a lot easier because the players either think, oh, it's working, so I'll just keep doing what he's telling me, or vice versa. The coach will think, oh, he's doing it all right because we're winning. But as soon as you start losing and losing consistently, that's when players think they know the answers, coaches think they know the answers, and then it can be quite how they turn that around to all buying in and believing in one thing can be quite a difficult thing, because you don't want to start changing too much when you start losing, but you also want to make sure that everyone's still buying into the plan that we have in place, or whatever it is. Everyone needs to buy into it, or else as soon as you start going individual, it just only makes it worse. And you see it all the time when teams go on losing streaks and they just find it real hard to get out of that losing streak. You saw it with the Chiefs in the Superugby last year. They weren't losing games by much, and they were playing some pretty good rugby, but you just get in the habit of losing, and it's only little things, just that little bit of self-doubt when the game gets close, or someone just going off on their own thing, not believing in what they do. It can make a massive difference, and it's a massive part of the game, to be honest.
Definitely. And you were speaking about the Chiefs and their losing streak, and they did play really awesome rugby, but they just couldn't pull off the result. So have you personally experienced losing streaks with clubs that you played for the Hurricanes, or how do you get out of that? Does the coaches tend to change the 10, or what do they do?
I've had massive losing streaks, to be honest. I got relegated twice in 1 year with the Coco Cola Red Sparks and London Irish. So when London Irish came up to the Premiership that year, I think we only won maybe 2 or 3 games out of maybe 25. So there's some massive losing streaks there. And a little bit like the Chiefs, a lot of them were quite close, and we were in the game for a lot of it, but you just lose the confidence to execute when things get tight, or the coach. It's a hard one with the coaches, because the coaches, it's such a long year over there, and like I said before, you want to start changing things, but the key is just to have the full buy-in to the players. Whatever it is that you plan you've got in place, you just need that buy-in, or else as soon as you lose the playing group, you're done. And it was the same in Japan. We went the whole season, we didn't win a game. So I think that year I think I was 0 from 12 or something that year. So that whole season I'd only won 3 games. I played about 40 games. It was a long year of rugby. I got pretty used to losing, which is never good. And Japan was a bit different, because you've got the language barriers and things like that, and the players that aren't full-time professionals. So it's a lot harder over there, because some of these guys are working all day. So, I mean, the expectations of them to be able to execute some of the things that's expected of them can be pretty unreasonable. But losing streaks are tough to get out of once you're into them.
Definitely, that's extremely difficult, because the season you're speaking about, that in Superugby, for example, compared to Japan and in the European Championship with London Irish, did you go up with London Irish and look for where you can get the results from, or were you just looking to win every single game, or did you face a team like, for example, Saracens or anyone, and did you think that, we're not going to get the result yet?
Yeah, no, I always felt like we could this has been throughout my whole career. I've always felt like going into a game that we could win that game, and no matter who I'm playing for or who I'm against, I always, for some, whether it's right or wrong, I always feel like as a side we're going to win that game. I've been in probably games earlier on in my career where you do win those games where you're not supposed to. You might be, the bookmakers might have you at like $10, you're no chance of winning this game. Everyone writes you off and you win it. And I think it's probably from those moments that you realise that anyone can actually beat anyone on their day. There's so many little parts of a rugby game that can make massive difference. Like, a couple of intercepts and that's 14 points. And now you're right on the game. Like, it's tough to catch a team with a 14-point lead. Things like that. You realise that no matter who's on the other team, that at the end of the day, they're just people. And no matter how good they are, when they're under pressure, they struggle, and everyone struggles under pressure if you can put them under enough pressure. So I've always felt like going into games, whatever side I've been in, that we're going to win that one.
That's awesome, brother, especially under pressure. And you're speaking about pressure. So have you played against players who are the most calm under pressure? Like you're speaking about, you've done the podcast with Terry Black, and he's so calm, ice in his veins. I've seen him play live in Cape Town, and brilliant player.
Yeah, there's a few special ones like that. Teddy's one. He's probably the most relaxed guy I've played with. He was just so calm, and even at a young age, you could see him. He was probably 20 or 19 or something. He came into the Hurricanes. Martin Ono outside him. I remember when I came in, I was stressing. Felt like real helter-skelter sort of mindset. But you just saw Oteri come in, and he was just so chill, just calling the shots. I was like, man, this guy's got something. He's got something good. And Bodie's the same. Bodie's so calm out on the field. You never see him stressed. These guys are just guys who have so much control over their body and mind. They're in the moment players, and just so relaxed about it. Geordie's actually another one who he's just nothing phases him. When he makes mistakes and stuff, he's happy to try anything. He backs himself all the time, and if he makes a mistake, he just doesn't care, and he'll try the same thing the next time and he'll pull it off, and whereas a lot of players that you play with, and myself included, if you do something that you don't do well and then you've got an opportunity to try it again, I probably wouldn't try that again. Whereas Geordie's the complete opposite. He's happy to make a couple of mistakes trying an offload, and then the third time he manages to nail that offload and they score on the corner. It's a match winner, and he's the hero. I love that about his mindset. He's just happy to back himself no matter what the situation.
That's awesome, because speaking about Jordie Barrett specifically, he'll try it and try it again until he gets it right. He's not afraid to step up to those massive kicks, and he's got power, massive amount of power. And for the All Blacks, with the Canes, just doesn't mind. The first time actually that I saw him play was Canterbury, and then I saw him 1 week in the ITN Cup. He was playing at 12, then I saw him at 13, and then I saw him at 10, and I thought, Crusaders are going to sign him. And then I saw the next season that the Hurricanes actually signed him. So because I support the Crusaders, so I was just thinking, I have to get him.
I remember actually the decision around it, because I was actually the Hurricanes fullback at the time, and I remember Bodie telling me that Geordie was going to sign for the Hurricanes if I did take my London Irish contract, and I knew Geordie was a good player. So I was like, shit, I should probably, for the good of this club, I should probably leave. So I ended up going.
Did you tell Geordie the secret that you wouldn't get into the teams you didn't leave?
He wouldn't have come, was the thing. He would have definitely started ahead of me, but I don't think he was going to come. He was going to sign with the Crusaders or someone else if I stayed. So, yeah.
We love the club. We love the game.
Yeah.
And James, do you think that obviously while we are still in COVID, how did your idea come with your philosophy around starting Waterlad podcast? And definitely in COVID, you got so many done. And you obviously have professional rugby friends. And how did the idea come about?
Yeah, so it was during the lockdown in New Zealand that we had sort of 8-week lockdown straight away. And I was listening to heaps of podcasts and I was loving them. The content that you can get from a podcast is awesome and so accessible. And I'd sort of been doing a similar, not a podcast, but I used on the Hurricanes bus for away trips. I used to put like an audio package together. So I was pretty used to like editing and recording. And I just thought a podcast would be an awesome idea. And I remember thinking about it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks thinking, oh, nah, don't want to put myself out there. I'm just going to, like the fear of failure started hitting me. Like I was like, I need to do it. But then I'll just think, shit, nah, it's just, I just had this like little bit of anxiety around it. Like, I just don't want people to judge me and things like that. Probably not going to go that well, that sort of stuff. And then I listened to it. Then I listened to a podcast, and it was like, just do it. And like, if you fail, then you fail. If you don't, then it's sweet. You're off. So at the end of the day, what's worse that's going to happen is you're going to fail your podcast, and your life goes on. There's no real downside to it. So I remember thinking about that and being like, oh shit, I'm going to do this. So I went online, bought some podcast gear, kept the receipts just in case it did go shit the first few times so I could return it. And then I just messaged a few guys, and I was like, if I set up a podcast, would you be keen to come on? And I got heaps of guys saying, yeah, I'd be keen to come on. And I was like, okay, there's enough people here around that would be keen to come on. So I just did it. I sat online during that lockdown and came up with all these, came up with the name, came up with the art, did it all myself. It was all pretty budget sort of stuff, and just got someone around, Reggie Goods, for the first time, and we just sat down and yarned, and just kicked on from there. And I said pretty early on that I was going to try and do 2 episodes a week. One was hopefully going to be a prank, but that was quite a big commitment, and one that I probably regretted at times throughout the season, especially when I started getting busy with Tasman and the Hurricanes. I thought, I'm not going to be able to keep this up. It's a fair bit of work behind the scenes with what goes on in the podcast, especially in the social media side of things, because that's a massive part of it. If you can have the podcast, but if no one sees it or knows about it, then no one's listening. So I've loved the journey though. It's been cool. I've learned heaps from it, and hoping to continue to grow it, because it's a really cool way to do things, I reckon.
Definitely. And like I spoke about earlier, the importance of us as supporters, or even not even supporting Hurricanes or whichever club we support, doesn't matter, that we can actually listen to professional rugby players from different clubs, different countries, and then we can listen to their story and their journey. And I think that's extremely important, because there's more to rugby than about what happens in the game. There's so much things happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I remember growing up, and I had a real hate towards some of the players, especially some of the Crusaders players at the time. So I was a massive Hurricanes fan growing up. All my mates at school were Crusaders fans, so I used to hate. They used to wind me up, and I used to have a real hate towards some of the players, even though I didn't know them. And it's sort of something where I'm like, if I'd managed to talk to them, or if I'd ever heard a podcast of that player, I'm sure my thoughts of this guy would be completely different to hating them, because there's no reason to hate a player for the way they play. Like, there's so many. They're all good people. They're all people off the field. So it's just interesting the mindset you have towards a player as a rugby player. Like, you can hate someone as a player, but as a person, is going to be completely different. So I wanted to get out that you get to know this person as a person, and then you can see them as a player, and you can make your judgment on there.
Definitely, they're completely different as a player, and when you actually perhaps meet them or listen to their podcast, and that's what's extremely important, because you can actually connect with them and listen to their story. And so that's extremely important for us, and not to judge only what they do on the field, because you don't know what sacrifices perhaps they made in their lives to get where they are today.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more there.
And do you think that it's possible that Water Lad podcast could grow even more, a further fan base, and taking it to YouTube and perhaps other platforms, because you have a massive following, and obviously you are my inspiration. Water Lad podcast is my inspiration. So you were speaking about starting your podcast, and then one night I was just scrolling through all the podcasts and the posts, and then I thought, wait, I can start a podcast right here in South Africa, and then I'll ask you to be my first interviewee, because you're my inspiration. And then so what happened was that I've asked you, and then I've asked Paranui Hawira. I've asked him as well, and he said yes, no problem, because we met up here in Cape Town. And I've asked a few South African rugby players and a couple of guys I've played with. And the next thing I knew, I had like about almost 10 interviews lined up. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I haven't done any research into a podcast, but I started an account and everything. I was so excited.
That's good stuff. I love that, and it's awesome to hear that the Water Lad podcast has inspired you. And mate, looking forward to listening to some of your episodes and some of the interviews that you do. I've got to drive about a 30-minute drive to work most days, so love chucking on a podcast no matter which one it is and having listened. So I'm looking forward to tuning into your one.
Perhaps your own one you'll be listening to while you're driving. So that I can't wait to get editing and uploading it, definitely.
Sounds good, mate. Looking forward to it.
And also, you said you're going to try to get the Tere Black, so hopefully that can definitely work out. It's a pity that we couldn't meet up here in Cape Town, but I did meet Harry Plummer and Overdoing Fassi, so that was awesome as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, Oted is a good man. Definitely try and reach out to him. He's a guy who struggles to say no to anyone, so you're a good chance of getting him. If you don't ask, you don't know. So the more people you ask, the more likely you are to hit someone. But I've been quite surprised at how generous guys have been with their time. It's quite a big commitment to sit down for an hour for some people, especially some of the busy ones, to sit down for an hour out of their day to come and talk for nothing. So I've been really appreciative of everyone who's given up their time, and I'm very, very grateful, because without someone to talk to, it's not a podcast, or not an interesting one anyway.
Yes, definitely. Like your journey is never alone, it's always with other people. And you've obviously grown your podcast with Pure Sports CBD, and I think that's awesome as well. And hopefully I can grow my following, and definitely can, it's not for fame, but really for the stories, and that we can actually appreciate our local and international rugby players and the sacrifices they've made, and know what it takes to get there.
Yeah, there's so many cool stories out there in rugby. Like, no, there's no smooth rugby career. Every player goes through adversity or challenges at some point. So it's awesome to hear people talk about them, and then give advice to people who are in the same position, wanting to become not even a rugby player, but a professional athlete, or even someone in the work. A lot of it crosses over into everyday life and challenges that you might face. So there's always really good lessons to learn from people, and the more stories you can listen to, I think the more you can learn.
And Jimmy, are there any tips that you can share with our listeners, especially for the younger ones, or myself, even as I'm still trying to get back from my shoulder injury? It's really difficult, and to become professional rugby players, and what they should put in to get where they want to be.
Yeah, I always felt like the more I started to sacrifice, like I mentioned at the start, the more things started to happen to me. So working hard is a massive one. Like, I spoke to Brad Weber the other day, and he mentioned it. Like, he got dropped from Otago, and then he just realised that he just wasn't working hard enough. He was he was taking the easy options, and then he started working hard, and things started to happen. And a couple of years later, he's in All Black. My path wasn't quite that quick, but I did feel like the more I started working and the more stuff I started to sacrifice, might have been sleep, might have been like going out that weekend, could have been anything, like any money that I got to reinvest it into myself as a player, might be like protein shake or new boots or something. Just sacrificing stuff. It not only makes you a better player because you're doing that extra gym session, it also increases your drive because you don't want to make that sacrifice. You don't want to waste those sacrifices, you know, so you feel like, I need to sort of succeed in this now because I've made this much sacrifice, and you're fully into it. So I felt like that was a real massive thing for me. And even talking to other players, they've all talent, saying it in different sort of terms, but it always comes back to like that work ethic and sacrifice and staying positive and having fun. That's another one as well. Like a lot of people, if you take it too seriously, you can get caught out as well. So make sacrifices, work hard, and have fun. Enjoy the ride, whether it's a good moment in your career or a tough one like injuries and stuff. It's really important to enjoy the injuries, as hard as that can be, but look at opportunities to come back as a better player. Enjoy the rehab, enjoy the chance to, if it's your shoulder injury, enjoy the chance to grow your fitness while being able to run or whatever you can do. Look at opportunities to just grow and develop as a player outside of that injury. I know with my hips, I suffered a lot of hip injuries or ankle injuries, so I always felt like there was a real good chance to grow the upper body, and got excited about that. And just little things like that. Give yourself challenges and stay motivated, because I know it can be tough when you're injured, but if you change your mindset, you can turn it into a positive, so that when you come out of that injury, you'll be a lot better for it. You'll be a better player and you'll be ready to go.
Definitely, man. And you have to work hard, you have to stay positive, make those sacrifices, but most importantly, you have to enjoy it. So if you're not enjoying putting in that work and you're all serious, it's not going to benefit you.
Yeah, and I think that's with anything. If you're doing a job that you don't enjoy, it's hard. It becomes a real tough job. It's a real grind. You don't want to be there. You're not going to put in the effort that you probably should. But if you love what you do, man, it's so much easier. And I'd encourage anyone, like, no matter what it is that you love doing, try and make that a living. Like there's so many ways to make anything a living now. You can, if you like walking along the beach, you can probably take photos of yourself walking along the beach and make it a job somehow if you're good enough. Like there's that many weird jobs out there. If you love it and you enjoy it, it makes it not work. So then you're willing to work a lot harder than you are if you don't enjoy it. And it's the same with rugby. Like rugby's a great job. Like there's so many cool things about it, but it is hard. Like like I said, there's no easy rugby career, and there's a lot of tough times in rugby, especially with like social media and stuff now. I know a lot of guys struggle with getting a lot of criticism and things like that. Like mentally it can be quite tough, but and physically it's really tough as well. Obviously your body goes through hell. There's a whole thing about head knocks at the moment, which is all pretty scary stuff, but the journey that rugby can take you on and the people that you meet, the times that you have, it's such a good time. So I've obviously got no regrets about chasing that career and living a really good life.
And obviously that worked out for you perfectly in your own time. Obviously everything will come around and you're still within the rugby field, going into coaching. And what's really, really important right now that's a topic actually is mental health in the rugby or in any sport. And did you experience any mental health challenges or criticism on social media, or even when you get locals in your communities after you've had a bad game or the team's not performing well?
Yeah, I've faced a little bit, but I never really took it too seriously, to be honest. Like I remember getting I remember some really abusive messages after a game on, I think it was my Twitter feed or maybe Instagram messages or something. Just some guy just, absolutely, he'd obviously lost the bet or something and was just really fired up. And you can take that to heart, or you can just let it go and realize that this guy's not in a great place to be having to go onto his social media and spray you. It's I sort of do feel sorry for them in the end, like for them to have to go into that detail to want to try and hurt you as a player or hurt you as a person. They're obviously going through a really tough time themselves. So if you read into too much of that, especially at the higher level, I know that All Black boys, they cop a hammering if they have a bad game or make a bad mistake. I was never really at the level where I copped it too much, but I know there's a few hearty fans, especially when I was playing for the Taranaki. I remember used to getting a fair bit while I was playing for them, and at the odd time with the Hurricanes as well, obviously on that big global stage. So there's a few times there where after a bad game there were some messages, but like I said, mate, you just got to ignore it, feel sorry for them, send them back some love, and hopefully it can spread to them and make them a bit more positive.